Hello, everyone in CBP community. I am Meghan Connolly Haupt, and this session at the CBP Virtual Fall Conference is about how to attract sponsors for brewery events and programs. And thank you for being with me here today. Thank you to Andrew and everyone else involved in Craft Beer Professionals for hosting this conference, which is 100% free for attendees. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the sponsors. So Pneumatic Scale Angelus, ABS Commercial, CO2meter.com. Thank you so much for all your industry support and support of Craft Beer Professionals. So a little bit about me before I get into the content. I have been in marketing for 25 plus years. Hard to believe for me to be able to say that. And I've been in the craft beer industry for 8 years already, which I think kind of makes me a veteran of sorts. I started with the New York State Brewers Association, and there I was the head of marketing and partnerships for about 6 years. I've worked for Arrived, which is an allied member in the industry. Nancy, the chief people officer at Arrived, spoke yesterday in the conference about why data-driven breweries succeed. So you're going to want to check out her session as well. I've been a consultant with CBP for the last 2 years, working with Andrew on partnership development. It's been a pleasure. And currently, I'm a consultant with Drink NY Craft, which is an e-commerce site devoted to helping small breweries further their reach through online direct-to-consumer sales. With regard to sponsorship, I developed expertise in this area of marketing many years ago. I was on the leadership team that produced and created the sponsorship program for the largest event ever to take place in Central California. It was the San Jose Grand Prix. We had 150,000 people over a 3-day period on the streets of San Jose, and it was a blast. And really, I take a lot of my learning from that deep dive experience into all of the work I do in sponsorship and partnership. It doesn't have to be on that scale. It's still the same process of finding and securing high-level sponsors. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to go through the process of securing mutually beneficial sponsors that generate the highest revenue. Sponsorship is a pretty sophisticated form of marketing, but you'll learn the process at a high level and hopefully feel inspired to give it a try. I've been on the CBP Facebook forum, and it comes up a lot of people operating, owning, running breweries, asking about how to sponsor events, how to secure sponsors, what's sponsorable. Hopefully we'll answer all those questions in this one session today. We don't get into how to select community events to sponsor. Being on that other side of the coin of being the sponsor is a whole other set of skills and processes and materials. So I don't have time to get into that today, but I am available. My contact is on the last slide. If you want to follow up with me, I can certainly give you some counsel on being a sponsor as well. But for today, we are just talking about how to secure sponsors for your event. And I highly encourage you to ask questions. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what has worked for you, what hasn't worked, where you find the process to be really sticky and you have kind of trouble getting past it. A lot of breweries I've seen in the forum have sponsorship on some level, but I really encourage you to think as big as possible because it often takes the same amount of time and resources to secure a low-level sponsor as it does a high-level sponsor. So in an effort to streamline and get the most for your time and for your assets. Why sponsors? The very first one, revenue, is obvious. That's what we all think of when we think of sponsors. Sponsors who can offset the cost of running the event or the program. Very important reason, of course, to have sponsors. But there's 3 other reasons that indirectly lead to revenue that are definitely worth mentioning. And so the first is experience. Customers come to an event and oftentimes expect to see sponsors. They're not bothered by signage. But when those sponsors can add to the event experience, make it better than you could have as the producer of that event, then that's a real win-win for everyone involved. And I'll give you an example. In New York State, the NYSBA throws the Bright Vibes Festival. One of the sponsors, it's a beer and music festival, I should say, if that's not kind of implied. One of their sponsors is Brewbag. Brewbag is a lawn game similar to cornhole, but it's played with beer pong rules, these wood boards and bean bags. So Brewbag is a sponsor of the event. In addition to paying a sponsorship fee, they set up 10 sets of boards and run a Brewbag competition at the festival. It's highly engaging. It's really visual. It's so much fun. They give away a set of boards to the winning team. It gets highly competitive, and it really elevates the festival from just being about beer and music to really being this full kind of 360 type experience, very engaging for the attendees of the festival. So that's a really great example of Brewbag not only paying a sponsorship fee, but making the event just a lot more fun. The next one is credibility. So this is a really important benefit that sponsors can provide, particularly for a first-year event or an event that has a high ticket price where consumers might be a little bit nervous or gun-shy or questioning about the event. So if you have a big name company, or you have a company that has a really great reputation, or a company that people think very fondly of or recognize, maybe they employ a lot of people in the community, then they bring credibility to your event. And in and of itself, your event may be able to achieve that. But when you align with companies that are bigger, and again, have a positive connotation, positive association, then that's going to kind of pull you and your event or program forward as well. And then reach. This kind of goes hand in hand. So your partners can, should, might help you with the marketing and getting the information about the event or program out into the community, may help you sell tickets. They may buy tickets in bulk. They may reach out to their partners. They may reach out to their suppliers, their vendors, all their employees, and help with ticket sales. They may help bring in other partners, especially if they come in at a high level. They may want their own partners to be on the sponsorship banner with them. So in addition to revenue, why it's important or why you should spend the time to try to secure sponsors are because of experience enhancement, credibility, and reach. So there's some specific language associated with sponsorship development. I will probably use more than these four, but the four most important to know are the following. A property. A property is what we call any event, program, or venue for which you seek a sponsor. We typically think of a property as real estate or a physical thing. In the world of sponsorship, a property is simply the thing for which you're trying to get sponsors. So it can be a festival, it can be a museum exhibit, it can be a fundraiser event. The property is simply the catch-all word to refer to the thing for which you're looking for the sponsors. The prospect. The prospect is the company that you are hoping will turn into a sponsor. An asset. An asset is something that you may or may not choose to give to the sponsor in exchange for their fee, their sponsorship fee, or for goods. Because in some cases, you will find it's beneficial if a sponsor can provide a service or goods that offsets a line item. That's called an in-kind contribution or in-kind fee. I don't get too much into that here just simply because of time. The one thing I will say about in-kind is you should really only accept in-kind if it offsets a budget item for which you otherwise would have paid money. That's my rule of thumb. So an asset, and we'll get further into assets a little bit later in the presentation. We'll spend a lot more time on that. And then activation. This is a really important piece of sponsorship. This is kind of the end piece, right? This is executing on the sponsorship agreement. And oddly enough, the activation piece of sponsorship is often least considered in the whole process of sponsorship, but is really the most important because you want to keep your sponsors happy. You want them to have a good experience. And you want to live up to your word. You want to give them that checklist of everything that you had contracted to provide in exchange for their fee or good. What can be sponsored? Almost anything is the short answer. But another way to ask the question is, what is your property? So I'm going to pause just for a moment for all you people either watching this live or watching this as a recording to think about what your brewery or your guild or your company does that could be a sponsorable property. Do you do trivia night every week? Do you have a festival of any kind, a food festival, a beer pairing festival? Do you do tours that could be sponsored? Do you do private events? So I'm just going to pause for a few seconds to give you a moment to think about everything you do and what may be a good fit for sponsors. I'll give you a couple of examples. Heritage Hill Brew House in upstate New York. They have a small museum as part of their absolutely gorgeous campus. It's called the Central New York Brewseum. That is a pretty obvious element of all of their activities that could be sponsored. And I went back through the CBP Facebook community forum and saw a number of breweries talking about things that they're doing. Gugman House Brewing in Indiana asked about sponsorship for some of their programs. Another brewery asked about their live music series that they do in the summer. What I did read in a lot of the comments is breweries engaging in some sponsorship, but really just selling off individual assets. So I really want you to think about, once you create that list, that menu of your assets, of packaging and bundling in order to get the highest possible dollar for it. It takes a lot of work to manage sponsors and to oversee a sponsorship program. So you want to minimize the administrative side of it by bundling and selling one package at, say, $10,000 rather than 10 packages at $1,000. Here are the basics. There are probably more basics, but these are the basics that I teased out for you. It takes time to create a sponsorship program, develop a relationship, sell a package, get a deal signed, especially the higher the dollar value. It may be hard to get to the decision maker. And maybe if there's more than one decision maker, it may be hard to get everyone on the same page. So I would start 6 months out, unless it's really low level, in which case I don't even know why you would go after sponsors, but give yourself 6 months. That should be a comfortable lead time to follow the process and get the highest dollar for your program. Motivation. You need to be clear on what the sponsorship fit is for the prospect that you're reaching out to, because you need to inspire the decision maker at the prospect to want to be involved in your property. And so to understand exactly what motivates them will help you inspire them and sell them. It may be that, let's say coming out of COVID, they haven't been able to do their big holiday parties the past few years, and they really want to find a property that they can sponsor that would be a big party or celebration for their staff. Maybe that's their motivation, is that it's not so much a marketing play to bring in more customers, but it's a staff appreciation sponsorship play. So trying to get to understand where the prospect is coming from, what they're interested in, and why they're interested in it is an early step in the process, and really an integral step. That leads into customizing the package. We haven't gotten into talking about assets too deeply yet. We will do that in a couple slides. But when you create the package that you send to the prospect that you hope will convert them to be a sponsor, you want to pick and choose from your list of assets those that really speak to that company's need. What do you have that you can translate to be about them? And sometimes you may have your list of assets, but in the conversation of talking to a prospect, you brainstorm a couple more assets that are really specific to them and what they hope to get out of the sponsorship deal. The biggest deals can take the same amount of time as the small deals. So it doesn't make any sense to waste your time on the small deals. In terms of what you have available to sell, you don't want to sell off all your assets and then end up talking to someone who would have bought the entire menu of assets for one high fee. You put yourself in a bad position then. So you want to always try and sell the highest level position. And then once you get that company in, they will help set the tone and help basically sell off the other positions. Or if it turns out to be too hard to sell that, then you can kind of split it in half and work on having two sponsors or a co-sponsorship position. And you can always keep breaking it down from there, but you can't go the other way around. So if you have multiple sponsorship positions for your property, you definitely want to try to sell the highest level first. Experience here. The best sponsors will seamlessly fit into the experience. Think about what the sponsor can do to elevate the property. We talked a little bit about that with the brew bag example at the Bright Vibes Festival. Deliver more than you are contracted to do. This is my own personal ethos, which I really hope you take on, you embody also in your own sponsorship programs. But you will have a contract, you will have a written agreement of what you are going to provide to the sponsor in exchange for a certain fee. I always try to withhold some assets and have some in my back pocket. You just never know when you're going to need them. At the San Jose Grand Prix, we had a mid-level sponsor who had paid about $45,000. It was a company called Cytomax. I delivered everything in the agreement. They had their space, but they didn't like it. They were really frustrated with their hospitality space. They thought it was in a really ugly section. They thought it was unsightly, and were pretty disgruntled right out of the gate. And so I had to scramble, but I was able to pull together other assets to beautify their space, so that they were really proud of it and felt much more comfortable. And they ended up being thrilled and then signed on for multiple years thereafter. I had fake greenery essentially, and had to end up lining their whole hospitality space with this greenery to give them a more intimate experience, and kind of block out the background of the race cars and pedestrians and so on. So that was a good lesson for me to learn. My first big opportunity in sponsorship. Always have something. You never know when you're going to need to mitigate an unforeseen situation, make a sponsor happy, what have you. So always try to deliver more than you promise. Here's the sales process laid out as clearly as I possibly could for you. So you start with your property. This should be a motive. Why is it unique? Why would a company care? Why would they want to get involved? What makes yours special or different? That goes back to your brand of what is your story and why is that going to resonate with customers and sponsors? Then you move into the audience. The better you can define your audience, the easier your sales will be. For first year events, you're not going to have a ton of demographics to share, but you might be able to pull from other events that you've done. Maybe there's similar events. You might be able to pull from other events in the community, other breweries across the country, maybe in similar communities. You could tap them to learn more about the type of audience for these kind of events. But you'll have to do some projection if it is first year, or even first couple years on your property. And you look at similar properties. Sometimes the audience quality is more important to a sponsor than audience numbers. So with a first year event, if you think, well, we might only get 500 people attending this, that's not a lot of value to a high level sponsor. But the demographic fit is spot on for that sponsor, then they'll be really excited about it. So don't worry so much about size if you can kind of offset that or justify with the demographic of the audience. So trying to understand age, gender, their likes, dislikes, interests, how they spend their money, anything that you can share or dig up or come up with about your audience or event attendees is going to be really helpful in the sales process. Prospecting. So again, the prospects are the companies that could be a good fit for sponsors. Now, you're not going to know for sure. You don't know the ins and outs of their business, but I would start with an industry. So let's say the Bright Vibes Festival here in New York. Again, we'll use that as an example. That's a consumer-facing music and beer festival. So what industries are in alignment with the demographic of craft beer enthusiasts in upstate New York? Off the top of my head, I would think of some specialty food companies, maybe hot sauce companies, maybe beef jerky companies. Specialty food industry is where I might start in that process. And it's really ideal if you can work within one industry and go after competitors, because it may be that you get two companies interested and you say, hey, your competitor over here is interested in that position too. Do you want it? It can create a sense of urgency. It can also help you get top dollar. And it can also help you really understand the fit between the prospects and your property. And then assets. Again, this is the menu of what you have to offer, what you can sell and create your packages from. You want this list to be as exhaustive as possible. You want to try to think of everything. I have literally sold as one of the assets of a bigger sponsorship package, sponsorship of the bathroom, right? Everyone goes to the bathroom at an event. It's quiet. It's kind of a captive place. Do you want to hang posters on the inside of the stalls? Do you want to do decals on the bathroom floor? Do you want to put signage on the bathroom mirrors? So really, this is the most fun part, maybe. This is definitely the most creative part, is brainstorming your list of assets. And I'll give you some examples on a slide in just a second if you stay with me. The comps. The reason for comps is to justify your fees and your pricing, which is the last step. It'll also give you a sense of the industries to go after, right? So if you're looking at, let's say you want to do a private dinner and you know that your buddy's brewery does an event and they have a sponsor in the automotive industry. Well, that gives you a really good place to start, the automotive industry, because you know that an automotive company had sponsored a very similar event. This will help you determine the price of your package, and it is really important to do some research on related properties. Again, related in your community, related in the type of event that it is, related in the type of audience or demographic. You're going to want to do a nice cross-section of research. And then lastly, your pricing. This is probably the hardest part of sponsorship is feeling like you're getting the right fee for the value that you're providing. And you're never really going to know exactly, especially for a property just starting out. And you'll probably undersell, you'll probably leave money on the table, and you'll be bummed. But it's a place to start. You can always go up, and you will go up with your fee as you continue to make that an annual property. Each year you can raise your fees and renegotiate. Some sponsors, especially early on, may want to do a multi-year deal, which is great. You think, oh my gosh, this is awesome. The auto dealership down the street, they want to do a 3-year deal right out of the gate. We don't have to worry about a sponsor for the next 2 years after this. But you don't want to go down that path the first couple of years of an event, because you don't really know what it's worth. And you most likely would end up leaving a lot of money on the table if you did a multi-year deal right away without really understanding what you've got. Here are some pictures of actual activated sponsorships that I took with my very old iPhone. But let's talk about these 3 photos. These are 3 different events. The first is at an outdoor arts venue. You'll notice Clorox is the sponsor. The second picture is at a children's museum. And this is actually an exhibit of a ship where kids can play on the ship. And you see LL Bean sponsored the life vests on the ship. And the third is a Willie Nelson concert that I was at that was sponsored by Ellis, which is a medical group. So two of these are, in my opinion, are very poorly done, and one is really well done. I'm going to give you a moment to pause and look at these activations and think about them before I tell you my opinion. Okay, so the first one, the Clorox. I like their effort of designing the sign to match that it's an outdoor arts venue, right? It's designed like a box of sound equipment, like a box of sound gear, it looks like. Although I didn't get that at first. I didn't quite get the imagery there. So they kind of missed the mark. I get where they were going, and I applaud the effort. But if you'll notice, the sign is about the clean seats. The sign is placed on the lawn. It is nowhere near the seating. The people seeing this sign are the people that have paid for lawn seats, where they are standing behind the sign. The people whose seats are actually cleaned by Clorox are inside the venue and do not see these signs. So the placement was a very, very poor choice. The imagery, I think, was a little off the mark. What I would have done to activate this, instead of the A-frame signs, I would have put removable stickers on all of the seats in the venue. The seats are hard plastic; they're not fabric, and I would have had little signs that said something about you're putting your butt down on a clean, sanitized seat. That would have been a more appropriate time in the customer experience for them to get that message. So the Children's Museum, this is the one I think is very well executed. There was no big sign that said exhibit sponsored by LL Bean, but LL Bean is the largest, most well-known company in the community where this museum exists. And they provided cash for their sponsorship, I'm presuming, but they also provided an element to enhance the experience for the kids. The kids not only get to walk on a ship and turn the wheel and play with pretend fish, but they get to strap on an LL Bean life vest. I didn't know LL Bean made life vests until I was at this museum. And I thought, oh, well, that's really neat, because they're selling an actual product of theirs. They're marketing an actual product. People are trying it on. And it's added the kids' experience of being on this ship within the museum. So I think that was very, very well done, and really illustrates my point about experience enhancement. And then the third thing, and this one honestly just kind of kills me. This is a Willie Nelson concert. The demographic of people at that concert were not, did not give me the impression that they were really the most health conscious people. It was crowded, it was dark. And here is the Ellis pop-up, which they didn't even bother to staff. So it's in the way. You have to walk around it. It's an eyesore, really, in the middle of this experience. It does nothing to support a positive connection with Ellis, and it looks abandoned. So I think that actually could work against Ellis as the sponsor, not support their business goals. So that one actually made me laugh, which is why I had to take a picture of it. Now we're going to get into talking about the assets. I know I've teased you with this for the last half hour. These are some basic assets. There's not a one size fits all. Every property is going to have a different menu of assets, but these are some that are kind of my go-to assets, which you see, commonly in packages. They're not specific to any one property. Many of these assets are intangible. And so when you are negotiating your sponsorship fee, you're going to think about the cost for you to have the sponsor and to execute on that agreement. And anything that costs you money is something that you're going to want to negotiate out first. And you're going to want to keep in those things that don't actually cost you anything. And some of those things that don't cost you anything are highly valuable to the sponsor. So going through this list: exclusivity, naming rights, and association. What I mean by that: if you sell a sponsorship to, let's say, a specialty or craft coffee company, let's say Death Wish Coffee, they have exclusivity for that industry, whereby none of their competitors will be able to sponsor the event. That's what exclusivity is. You can define exclusivity as broad or as narrow as is appropriate for your property. So if a company is getting the naming rights, you would probably give them pretty broad category exclusivity. If somebody is sponsoring something small, maybe they're sponsoring a table or they're sponsoring the bar or something, you may give them a more narrow definition of category or exclusivity. You may decide to give total exclusivity to a company for the right price, a company that's going to come in and kind of buy all the assets. You may say you have complete exclusivity and no other sponsors will be involved in this property. You see, for this CBP Fall Virtual Conference, of which this session is a part, there are 3 sponsors, all non-competing. They probably all have exclusivity for their industry. The next one will go across the top row: tickets, VIP, hospitality. So sometimes the sponsor is really interested in the experience rather than the return on investment from a sales perspective. So sometimes they want an experience that you're not offering the general public or general ticket holders. So you want to create a VIP for them. Maybe they all get gift bags. Maybe there's a special viewing area. Maybe they get a meet and greet with the band, or maybe they get a private tour, a tasting with the brewer. That's something that can be very, very important, depending on the interest of the sponsor. But tickets to the event, that's kind of a given. How many? If you have a cap and you think you're going to sell out, you're going to want to give fewer tickets to the sponsor, but you're going to want to make that consistent with their sponsorship fee. Mailing list. This can be really, really important. I found in this industry in particular, the mailing list is pretty worthwhile. So let's say you have an event with 500 attendees and it's sponsored by a local coffee company. And we know that a lot of craft beer enthusiasts are also craft beverage enthusiasts and enjoy their coffee. And so you get this coffee company to sponsor. You may decide as part of their sponsorship package to give them the contacts of every single person who attended the event. That's something that costs you nothing, but is an asset that you want to be really careful of. You don't just want to give that to every sponsor because you don't want to compromise the integrity of your own property. Sampling, demos, giveaways. This is an area of experience enhancement. If I was walking into that Willie Nelson concert and it was sponsored by Liquid IV or some sort of hangover cure product company, and they handed me a sample as I walked in, I'd say, oh, this is great. Put it in my back pocket, right? A little freebie for the attendees. So anytime a sponsor can do sampling or demos or giveaways, that's usually very good for them, and really is a nice plus for the ticket holders. That doesn't work so well with service-based industries. Service-based industries are not great sponsor prospects, as you saw with the LS abandoned booth at the Willie Nelson concert. You're better off with a consumer-facing product company. Logo placement, staff shirts, coasters, napkins. Again, this is an area to be really, really creative. Where else can you appropriately incorporate the logos of your sponsors? Social media, this is a given, of course, in this day and age. All your pre, during, and post-event communications via social media, email campaign, all of that is just touch points and really, really adds up. And so you're going to want to understand and possibly take some time to grow these digital communities before you go seeking your sponsors. Like the biggest possible audience you have for social media and your distribution list, that's going to add value to your sponsors. Logo use and association. So what we mean here is by sponsoring your event, they get the benefit of being aligned with your brand. I talked earlier about the other way around with regard to credibility for your event, but we're flipping it here. Let's say it's this new hip apparel company and they really think craft beverage enthusiasts is a good demographic fit for them. And you've got, a cool hip brewery brand. They're going to want to align with you because that's going to help them resonate better with this new customer that they have yet to gain their credibility with. And so the logo use is giving the sponsor the right to use an event, a property logo in all of their promotions. And again, that's self-serving for you because you want them out there marketing this event on your behalf. I typically advocate for custom logos that are co-branded, that really are within the family of your brand, not the sponsor's brand. But you create it in a specific event logo because you don't necessarily want sponsors using your logo, and you want a designated brand for the property, especially if it's something you think is highly sponsorable. Signage and videos, you try to stay away from the big banner with the whole logo cloud. I don't see a lot of value in that for the sponsors. But a freestanding screen where maybe it's on mute, but you're looping videos of, that the sponsors have provided is more engaging, more visually interesting, supports the experience a little bit more. You don't want to create a situation where you've got sponsor logos plastered all over the place. We call that logo soup. And the greatest example of that is like at a NASCAR event, right? Where the entire track is just logo banner, logo banner, logo banner. That's not ideal for the types of events and properties that this audience will have, and really doesn't create a good experience for the attendees. And then speech and announcements. A lot of times, you're going to thank the sponsors from the stage or the mic if that's available. But sometimes the sponsor wants 2, 5, 10 minutes to give their own presentation or to make an announcement. You have to be careful with that. Of course, you don't want to disrupt the flow of an event. You want to make sure it fits in thematically. You don't want it to feel like a commercial break. So you have to really think that through carefully, but that's, part of the standard list of assets for you to consider. So I'm going to pause again just for a second and give you a moment to think about assets. Think about what you have that you could possibly include in a sponsorship package. Okay, moving on. Here's what you are going to need to develop a sponsorship program and secure the highest level possible sponsors. The deck. You could also do a one sheet, but I like a deck because you can provide quotes and images, and I like the idea of flipping through a deck. Typically do it in PowerPoint or now I use Google Slides most commonly. Send it out as a PDF. Assume it will be shared within the company, and don't put in any specific fees. It's fairly high level. I'll give you the outline for the deck on the next slide. So just hold your breath on that. But you want to give the whole picture of the property. Start with the vision, why you're doing it, why it's important, what's unique about it. Why is it exciting? Why should they get involved? You're going to want to tell them the day, the time, all those kind of details about the event. Really give as much as you can. Try to make it emotive. Try to make it inspiring. Show photos of people engaging. That's the overview of the deck. The more details, the better. Then you're going to have the proposal. And the proposal starts with a description of your property again, and then goes into the list of the benefits that you are willing to part with, that you're willing to share with the sponsor. You're going to include a fee at the very end because the fee is only relevant based on the benefits that are listed above the fee. You're going to want to set that fee higher than you think. You can always negotiate down. You can never negotiate up. So set it higher than you think, because it always feels bittersweet when you present a proposal to a company and say, okay, so this package is going to be $5,000. And they say, okay. You're like, oh man, I should have asked for 6,000 or 10,000, right? You feel excited that they said yes, but at the same time, you wonder how much money you left on the table. So set the proposal fee a little higher than you think, and then give yourself that wiggle room to negotiate down. You may not need the proposal document. In some cases, you can go straight to the contract, because the contract is essentially the legalese with the benefits. And the benefits can be included in the actual agreement, or which might be the easier way to go, is to have a standard agreement, pretty boilerplate, where you're maybe just changing out the name and address of the sponsor, and then using the appendix or Schedule A as the specific benefits that sponsor is getting. So that's really the only piece that you're changing out. That might be a little cleaner, easier way to manage it for you in the beginning. But you do want to do the contract, because there are a lot of things that you want to spell out. And I will say, in all the years I've been doing this, the number of times I've actually had to refer back to the contract is rare, is few. But what happens if the event is canceled? We went through this with COVID. All of a sudden, all these events are canceled. Sponsors have paid half their fee. What happens? Do we have to return the fee? Do we not have to return the fee? Do we give them half? How do we negotiate that? It was tricky. So you're going to want to think through, what happens if an event is canceled? What are the terms of payment? Do they give you 50% up front, which is typically what I do. I do 50% at the time of signing, and then 50% right before activation. Depending if it's 5-figure, 6-figure deal, you may spread that out into 4 payments, whatever feels right to you and is requested by the sponsor. But you want to outline as much as possible in the contract for your peace of mind and for theirs. And it's one of those things, again, once you've got that contract template, you're just going to keep reusing it. So it's only arduous in the beginning. The invoicing, that should be fairly self-evident. with small sponsorships, let's say a $500 sponsorship for something, I might combine the contract and invoice into one document. So the first page would be the actual invoice, but I would list the benefits on that first page, and then the second page may be the legalese. This is kind of a process, the deck, proposal, contract, invoice, and the report, which I'll talk about in a second. But you can combine elements as necessary or appropriate, because you don't want this program to be so arduous to implement, right? You don't want to spend all your time writing proposals and writing contracts and invoicing. Kind of defeats the purpose of the program, right? So there are cases where you can cut out the proposal step and just go from a deck to a contract. And there are instances where it may be appropriate to combine the contract and invoice together. I will say that my personal style is that I like to have a verbal agreement before I write out an agreement. I like to come to terms, at least fairly high level, about what the fee is, a general understanding of the benefits before I sit down and write the proposal, because it is a big bummer when you spend that time to craft a proposal and you send it and it gets rejected. It doesn't even necessarily get negotiated. So to the extent that you can have that agreement verbal and then, take your time to write it all out, that's my recommendation. So the report is the only piece that is after the activation. Everything else happens before. And the report is something that you are going to give to your sponsors to justify their spend, to encourage additional participation for future events or additional events that you may have available, or properties. You're going to include images, quotes, statistics, maybe something inspiring that happened at the event. This couple got engaged and they're so excited, and they will always, think of this event fondly and come back to this event on their anniversary, whatever. So you want it to be really positive, really inspiring. Cherry pick the information that you want to share with your sponsors. Let's say your attendance was just through the roof and you're super psyched, but let's see here. So ticket sales were really, really great, but let's say people left halfway through, wouldn't necessarily feel the need to put that in the sponsorship report. So you're just gonna want to present the positive truth to your sponsors. And you're going to want to send that pretty soon after the event, because you're going to want to ride the positive energy and start talking about sponsorship renewal. It's a lot easier to keep existing sponsors than it is to renew your sponsorship portfolio with every event or every year. So it goes back to always having some assets in your back pocket, delivering more than you contract for to keep your sponsors happy. I'm getting to the end here. We're at 50 minutes. I hope you're still with me, but we only have a couple more slides. Okay, this is the outline that I propose for your deck. Again, it could be a one sheet. I like a deck because it's more visual. It's just an easier format to kind of walk the prospect through. You may want to include something about your qualifications. So again, with Bright Vibes, why was the New York State Brewers Association ideally suited to throw the best craft beer and music festival in New York State? Well, we have X number of years of experience. We have a team who has done similar work before. Whatever credibility you have as the event organizer, you might want to share in the deck as well. But it's, what is the property? Who is the audience? What are the benefits? Again, high level benefits. You're not getting into granular assets. What are what's the general fees, and who is the contact? So another secret for you, or pro tip, don't share your fees ever. Don't put them online. Don't share them unless they are accompanied by that list of benefits, because it's only relevant in the context of what the benefits are that they're getting for that fee. I like to set up a meeting to walk through the deck. Or sometimes I'll send the deck via email as a PDF right before the meeting so that they can look at it on their own screen, and we'll walk it through. But I don't just send it without kind of the commitment or promise of a meeting where we can go through it together, the deck outline. So that is sponsorship made sexy in the last 51 minutes. And I would love to hear any questions that you might have. I know it's a lot. It's a pretty specialized area of marketing. I'm definitely available and around to help you and to answer your questions. So whether or not you have any questions or comments right now, that's okay. You can always follow up with me at megan@mchstrategy.com. I really appreciate your interest in this topic and wish you the best of luck in your sponsorship endeavors.